One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete, no flags, head on back up the mountain, Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete, incomplete, the bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it, 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. Coming at you here on a Monday night as we recap the game against the Duke Blue Devils, one of the games that, look, you probably are wondering on a Monday night, are you guys still as fired up as you were on Saturday about this game? And the answer is yes, because it's a game that I think for a lot of us may have signified the end of an era. And we'll tell you what that means coming up here in this edition of the podcast. This was one of those games that I really felt pretty good about where Carolina was at halftime of this game. Up 17-0. You saw the fight that we had wanted to see from this team. And, I mean, I don't know about you. I felt like at that point, I felt pretty confident that Carolina was going to win the game because this is just what they've done against Duke. That's why I thought it was the perfect opponent for them to come back against following a game like they had the previous weekend in Chapel Hill, where they fall to James Madison. And it looked like up until that point, we were going to be right. Now, I think we thought that there would be some fight from Duke in that second half. There would be some adjustments that were made, but I don't know if anybody really saw what was coming until you saw what happened maybe on that first drive of the second half, or maybe it was when Duke got the football in their possession and was able to drive down the field. I don't know what that moment was for you, and we'll talk more about that, but this is one of those games that, honestly, looking back on it, probably is one of the toughest losses that we have seen this team suffer in our time being fans.
Well, I think yes, because of what all goes into it. It comes after a week where you give up 70 points at home to a group of 5 opponent. It comes in a game where you blow a 20-0 lead in the second half, something that in year 6 you shouldn't be doing. Like, if this was Mack Brown year 1 and you were establishing your culture, your foundation, learning how to win, okay, the loss still stings, but you could almost explain it away, right? There's no way to explain what happened on Saturday other than the way that we've explained losses after we lost games we shouldn't have lost over the last couple of years, which was we got out-coached and we got outplayed in winning time because we weren't good enough, tough enough to close out the opponent. So, I said it this morning on the air at WFNZ that if Duke would have thoroughly beaten us, I'd have went on there and on here and said, hats off to them. They were the better football team in every facet of the game. I don't think that's the case. I think if you play this game 10 more times or 9 more times, I think Carolina wins 7 out of the 10 times. I really do. But has been the problem since Mack Brown returned. There's always one game every year where we've lost a game because we couldn't finish. And it feels like that's what Saturday was. That was a game that Carolina lost because they couldn't put the game away. And that's a tough pill to swallow. It's a tough way for you to lose for the first time to Duke since Mack Brown returned. And now at 3-2, 0-1 with the in the league with an undefeated Pittsburgh team coming into Kenan Stadium on Saturday, your season is squarely in the balance. And I don't think this was where we thought we'd be after you went on the road and won at Minnesota back in week 1. So it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of the situation. And now they are tasked with trying to bounce back from back-to-back losses and not allowing this 2-game slide to effectively ruin the 2024 season.
Yeah, and that, I mean, look, a lot of pressure is going to be on them this Saturday, but there was a lot of pressure on these guys in this game. And for them to, get up by 20 with 8:23 left to go in the third quarter and let it all slip away, it's hard to imagine a situation where this team is going to be able to regain their footing. This is the first loss, not only of the second tenure of Mack Brown against the Duke Blue Devils. This is the first time since 1989, when he has been on the sidelines for Carolina, that they have lost. Every season since Steve Spurrier and his team took the picture underneath the scoreboard in Chapel Hill, Mack Brown coached Tar Heel teams had found a way to beat Duke. And this one happens in the most dramatic fashion, where you allow them to storm back from down 20, one of the biggest comebacks in their program's history, and come away with a victory. It's as demoralizing a defeat as you can really remember. But honestly, this loss really was very reminiscent to me of some of the losses that you suffered in 2022. Georgia Tech was one, Carolina up 17-0. First sign of things going wrong, Carolina starts to collapse. Same thing against Clemson in the ACC title game. Carolina actually got out to a pretty good start in that ACC championship game, but the first sign of adversity, all of a sudden it started to snowball on them. And then their bowl game against Oregon, you take one pass interference penalty, it completely changed everything, and Oregon's offense was on fire the rest of the game, and they find a way to win. This felt exactly like that type of loss, because the first time there was some sort of adversity, especially for this defense, that was where this game started to slip away. I think it honestly really began with the punt being blocked. I know Carolina drove the length of the field, but when they had to settle for a field goal, that was the moment where I think a lot of us thought, oh boy, you've left the door open for Duke. There were plenty of opportunities to put this game away, and you haven't been able to do it. Mack Brown pointed to that in his press conference today, as if they were able to put that into the end zone and make it 24-0, you imagine that that's a lead that Carolina maybe finds a way to hold on to. But the biggest issue was when Duke started to run the ball on Carolina on that ensuing drive. That was where everything began to fall apart. And I think it just once again shows that this program right now has a terrible culture around it, because you cannot be a group that thinks every time one thing goes wrong, here we go again, and just completely collapse like we've seen this team do too many times.
Yeah, it's a lack of toughness, mental and physical. Look, football is all about overcoming adversity and mistakes, because you're gonna make them. But also, what happened? The fact that you had a 3-possession lead in the second half on the road, and Duke still knew if we run the ball, they're going to break, is a problem. Duke did to you what you should have been able to do up 20-0, which was to run the ball, wear them down, and get out of there with a rather comfortable win. Instead, a defense that played so sound in the first half, that was looking almost like what you saw week 1 at Minnesota, where they were everywhere, they were physical, they were in the backfield. If they weren't making the initial play, everyone's rallying to the ball. That all went away in the second half. You were getting gashed left and right. And on the flip side, as much as you ran Omari and Hampton in the first half, you never once really broke Duke's will, and you never were able to wear down their defensive front. And once it became apparent that Duke wasn't going to go away and it became a ball game, you asked Jacoby Criswell to throw the football, and the passing game just didn't have the same rhythm, the same spark it had last week against James Madison. So I think that's what's frustrating, is you were in position to control and dictate the outcome of the game and play to your strength. You have the best player on the field. And instead, it was your rival with a backup doing it to you, just gashing you over and over again for big runs, and ultimately sparked their comeback.
Yeah, and honestly, we probably should have seen it coming, because in the first half, they did not do a great job of slowing down the run. It was just, for some reason, Duke, which I guess it was because coming into the game, they had really leaned on their passing game to carry them. But in that first half, Duke was trying to force things. And the other thing was, they probably watched the tape on Carolina's secondary and saw how much that group was struggling and said, we're going to try to take advantage of it. I mean, the secondary played relatively well for the majority of the night. And that was not the group that I had the biggest beef with, at least not in coverage. But, you started to see as the night wore along that offensive line for Duke was starting to wear down the Carolina defensive front. And you really needed some guys on the back end of this defense to step up and make some plays. And that just never happened. When you look at the second half for this defense, 148 rushing yards allowed, 2 touchdowns in the final 2 quarters. They allowed 297 yards in the second half after allowing just 97 total yards of offense in the first half. So not only did the running game get going for Duke, but it then allowed their passing game to settle in. Now, look, there were some easier throws in the offense in the second half than what we saw in the first half from Duke. But again, this goes back to the fact that teams are able to make adjustments against Carolina, and it seems like Carolina's never able to react to those adjustments and find a way to hold on to win games. That's it. All Duke did was make a couple of tweaks to what they were utilizing on the offensive side of the ball, and all of a sudden, Carolina had absolutely no answer for it. I mean, that's when it points to coaching and this group not being good enough to make the adjustments necessary to get out of there with a win. That's what's sad, man. Manny Diaz is not a guy that should be out coaching a Hall of Famer like Mack Brown, but that's the point that we're at with Mack Brown and with the rest of this coaching staff.
It feels like at every turn, Carolina's coaching staff is 2 or 3 steps behind what the opponent is adjusting to. And it's almost like Carolina is caught off guard by the fact that teams are changing what they're doing when they're not having success doing it. And that's troubling. And what's more, I guess, damning, is that Mack Brown is not a hands-on coach in terms of being involved with the offense or being involved with the defense. He's an overseer. Like he's a CEO. We use that moniker all the time in college football, where he's basically overseeing the entire operation, which means he should be in contact and conversation with his coordinators and talking to them when the offense is on the field, talking to Jeff Collins. Okay, what are you seeing? What adjustments can you make when the defense is on the field? What tweaks can we make to our play calling to get the most out of our offense to become more efficient, more effective, more explosive? Those things aren't happening. And if this, again, if this was year one and this was a new staff put together, okay, there you could say there'd be some growing pains, and you're trying to figure out how to do all that in game. But that's not the case. This is year 6, and a lot of these guys, Mack Brown has relationships with. I mean, he hires all of his friends to work with, and you're still not seeing improvement in that area. So you knew Manny Diaz was going to coach with a chip on his shoulder. Mack Brown fired him back when he was his defensive coordinator at Texas. Mack Brown kicked his ass when he was head coach at Miami in a de facto New Year's Six play-in game during that COVID season when the two teams met down in Coral Gables. And it's a hard pill to swallow that Manny Diaz at Duke, with less talent, less resources, less everything, beat Mack Brown on Saturday on the field and off the field. And I think it's just another reminder of where the program is in year 6 under Mack Brown, and it's not where that's not where it should be, and it's not where I think we all thought it was going to be when he returned.
Yeah, one of the big issues for Carolina was 20 missed tackles in this game. And this isn't the first time Carolina's had this issue so far this year. You go back to that season opener against Minnesota, and they missed 14 tackles in that game. And you could say, well, that was the season opener. And that's, I think, what we all kind of thought at that time was, hey, this is the first time you're going up against somebody different than your own guys. And teams in general struggle tackling in week 1. But to miss 20 tackles in this game, Stick Lane misses 5. This was what he was known for as a safety last year. And he has been one of the worst when it's come to tackling this year. I mean, he had 4 missed tackles in that game against Minnesota, 5 in this one, season high for anybody on this team. Caleb Koss missed 3 tackles. Power Eccles and Elijah Huzzy each missed 2. This is an unacceptable area of issue for Carolina. Like, we've talked so much about penalties and how much it hurts Carolina, turnovers, how much they hurt. But this, more than anything, really, really hurts, because for Carolina, this is one of the things we've been trying to clean up for years. And we thought that Jeff Collins would potentially be the guy that was able to do it. But I don't think it really matters, no matter how much focus that you seem to put on it. First of all, I don't think they're tackling that much in practice. That was pretty much what I got away from the response that Andrew Jones of Tar Heel Illustrated sent when I quoted his tweet earlier today and said, honestly, it makes you question as to whether or not they tackle in practice. And he said, not much. That's not good. I don't care what other teams are doing throughout the country. And I mean, to be honest with you, there's no way that other teams just aren't tackling in practice. It cannot be the truth, because if they are and they're still tackling at that level, well, then it's the players. It's the lack of execution from the players, which I think a lot of it goes on them. But honestly, this seems like a coaching flaw that Mack Brown has. We heard last year before the game against NC State, because of how banged up they were, they refused to tackle. I don't know if they're doing the same thing with this group because they just want to limit the amount of exertion that they have for these guys during the week. But this is a team that needs to tackle in practice, because right now they are one of the worst tackling teams in the entire country. And when it came to this game, that's what cost you. People want to blame Jeff Collins, and Jeff Collins took the bullet for his guys, saying that they, got out of position and stuff like that. When you miss 20 tackles, you're in position. You're simply just not making the plays that you need to.
Yeah, no, that was going to be my main talking point. When you miss 20 tackles in a game, that means that 20 times you were in position to make a play, to make a tackle, and simply did not do it. Which tells me that I think Jeff Collins is doing what his job is to do, which is put the guys in a position to make a play. Mm-hmm. And if Carolina cuts the missed tackles in half, they probably win the ball game. because of just how backbreaking the missed tackles were. The lack of tackling in practice, there's honestly no excuse for it. Like, I get that you're injured. Man, you've got 130 players that you can put in uniform. You can tackle somebody before you get to Saturday. You look across the country, you look at the best teams in the country. I guarantee you that they're tackling. I guarantee you Georgia is going to tackle their rear ends off all this week after what happened on Saturday night in Tuscaloosa, where they let a 17-year-old kick their butt. And I'm not saying that we need to compare ourselves to Georgia, but if that's the standard program in the sport, if they can tackle leading up to conference games against better competition in the SEC, there's no reason why North Carolina can't tackle Monday through Friday before they take the field on Saturday. And so this is where the culture sits in that Carolina is soft, because soft teams tackle before they take the field on Saturday. Iron sharpens iron. You wake up sore when you go play because of what you've done in practice. Carolina is babying their guys so they're fresh for Saturday, but you're just not getting you're not getting the desired result. And so at some point, you've got to change the methodology because it's not working.
Yep.
And you hear it when you hear old time football players talk about how the product is different from when it is now. When you could have two-a-days and you used to tackle, you look at the NFL, because no one plays in the preseason. It takes till about October before to become NFL caliber football. Well, in college, it's the same thing. You have no preseason in terms of games, but you've got a month to tackle and get ready for your season opener, and it's still an issue. So, I think Jeff Collins has done the best job of any defensive coordinator, putting his guys in position to make plays. He can't make them for them. They've got to be tough enough to tackle. And time again, our players have proven that they're not tough enough to make winning football plays.
Yep. And again, it's got to start with practice. We've heard this so many times before that if you practice hard, the games are easy. For this group, it has never seemed like that. And when Jeff Collins says that he attributes the volume of missed tackles to guys trying to do too much, I mean, what does that even mean? Like, I don't understand. So that just means that they're frankly just not good enough. Like, if you're trying to do too much, you're overthinking. Well, you're not built to be a college football player. That's what I'm hearing. I get it that people are going to want to say, well, they need to do all this. And that's the thing. Mack Brown controls all of what goes on in practice when it comes to stuff like that. So as much as the defensive guys can beg, please let us tackle. If he's saying, look, I'm not doing that because I'm listening to the sports science people or whatever, there's nothing you can do about it. So then it comes down to the players being able to execute on game day. So I'm with you. At some point, you've got to change what you're doing, because we've been doing this for the last few years and the results are the exact same. And now here's the thing. When it was happening towards the end of seasons, it was one thing because you had built up some success where, even though we didn't like the way that it finished and we were frustrated, we would say, hey, you won 8-9 games. Now you don't have that luxury. This season is going wrong 5 games in, and it is officially panic time. And this defense is a big part of the reason why. So you need to figure something out on that side of the ball, because it can't be like this each game where you start out great in the first half, you show that effort out of the gate, and then things just fall apart. Like, at some point, it has to change. At the first sign of adversity, it can't be that all of a sudden we're melting down, because this is now 2 weeks in a row that we've seen what we've known about this program for so many years, despite them having a new defensive coordinator. You move on to the offensive side of the ball, and look, this group shares a lot of the blame too for what happened in the second half. They scored just 3 points in the second half. Just total yards wise, I mean, everything goes pretty quiet. $187 after having 220 yards of total offense in the first half. But the biggest issue was you went from 105 rushing yards at 4.6 yards per carry in the first half to 51 rushing yards and just 3 yards per carry in the second half. I thought that was really what changed this offense, was the running lanes that were there early in the game simply weren't there. Duke clearly did a better job of loading the box and slowing down that running game. That was clearly one of the focuses. But Carolina, just their offensive line had no push up front that entire second half. And once they got behind the chains and were in obvious passing situations on second and third down, that allowed Duke to do what was so effective for James Madison the previous week, which was just blitz the heck out of Jacoby Criswell. And I think that's one of the things, man. If Carolina is going to win games like this, they have to be able to wear opponents down. This Duke defensive line, which came in, boasted about, one of the best tackle for loss groups in the entire country, man, that first half, they didn't have anything. They didn't have any sort of push up front against Carolina's offensive line. Yeah, there were a couple of times that they may have gotten pushed, but it was one guy, and Amarian Hampton was able to break through. In that second half, it was simply the Tar Heel offensive line getting knocked back right off the line of scrimmage and the linebackers for Duke going to work. If this team is going to win games moving forward, the offensive line has to be better, especially when it comes to the running game in second halves.
Yeah, they just were never able to impose their will. Something that you would have thought up 20-0, you would have really worn down Duke's front. I think you got to give Duke credit. Their adjustments that they made really slowed down the running game. And they did a really good job getting bodies to Amarian Hampton and slowing him down and not letting him run crazy after contact. But this was frustrating. The penalties, I thought, were just so devastating at different times as well, where it felt like once Carolina would get something moving, some positive energy and momentum, here comes a penalty. Now you're in first and long, second and long, whatever it is, and you're back behind the chains. And so, this is where not adjusting to the adjustments, I think, really bit Carolina in the butt, because they really didn't seem to have a response once they took away the running game. You put probably a little too much pressure on Jacoby Criswell to make some throws that he's capable of making. But, if he misses them, then you open up the door for what ultimately happened on Saturday. So, it's not back to the drawing board because you did enough things well to build a 20-0 lead. It's more about, okay, how can we sustain that level of play? And then when a team makes an adjustment or two up front, how long is it going to take us to notice the adjustment, make adjustments of our own, and find different ways to attack them? Because Carolina was able to move the ball up and down the field in the first half and really control the ball and time of possession. And I thought going into halftime they would win the game. And I thought they would do so because they would wear Duke down, and that didn't happen. You got to be more efficient on third down, more effective on third down, but that means staying out of 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8s. And so, Criswell faced some adversity last week because his defense gave up 53 points, and he had to basically throw the ball the entire second half. This week he's on the opposite side where he was up 20-0 and wasn't able to sustain it. So this offense has to find a way to put together a complete game with Criswell at quarterback.
Yeah, well, and the thing is you just have to be able to run the ball consistently for the majority of the game. Because if you can't, and you're putting it all on Jacoby Criswell, he is not able to carry this team. That is not the type of quarterback that he is. He's a guy that is clearly the best quarterback Carolina has played this year. There are flashes of a guy that can make some special throws, but this is a guy that he's not Sam. He's not Drake. You can't just say at certain points of the season, we're going to give you the football, we're going to drop you back on 2nd and 3rd and long every single time, and we expect you to come away making plays. Because that was the point that Carolina got to in that second half on Saturday. And Sam and Drake were guys that just thrived in those types of situations. Every time that you got into one of those 3rd and 13 type plays with either one of those guys, it always felt like they found a way to make the play, especially in those early season matchups where Criswell, there were throws that were there. He just missed them. The one that was really killer was the miss that he had to Bryson Nesbitt on the final drive. He had him open. If he completes that pass, man, that's 3 straight completions in a row, 2 big plays in a row, because you would imagine that would have went for a pretty significant gain. And this offense continues to roll and at least probably gets near field goal range and gives Noah Burnett an opportunity to potentially win the game. But the thing is it ultimately should not have had to come down to that, because the strength of this offense is running the football, and you need your offensive line to be better. I mean, look, when it comes to the amount of blitzes that Duke and James Madison have thrown at Carolina, man, there's not really much you can say about the offensive line in those circumstances. When you're sending 6 or 7 guys, I mean, at some point, it can't be on the offensive line. It can't even be on the running back trying to help you in pass protection. They're just going to send more guys than you're going to be able to handle, because you make it these obvious passing situations over and over again. But still, I mean, you saw other times where Carolina's offensive linemen against the front four for Duke in that second half just simply couldn't handle it. So, I mean, the thing is when it comes to this offensive line, we knew that this was going to be a work in progress, but this certainly is not a group that is making a linear projection each week. It seems like this is a group that is going through a roller coaster week after week. And right now it's trending in the wrong direction. You saw your tackles struggle again this week. Even, the guard play. I mean, last week it was Willie Lampkin getting beat in one-on-one situations. Austin Blaski's had some rough moments since coming back from the injury. I mean, this offensive line group has to find their footing here soon, because if not, this offense is not going to be as effective as they're going to need it to be with a defense that at this point we still can't trust to stop anybody consistently.
Now you're learning reality of not having an NFL caliber quarterback to make everything look better. Carolina's margin to win games is as small as it's been in Mack Brown's second tenure here, because Criswell's a nice quarterback. I think he could be a top half of the ACC quarterback. He's not a guy that's, he's not an NFL draft prospect. This guy is going to go pro in something other than sports. And so with that, you've got to be sound in all your other areas. And I really bought into that. I really bought into going into this year that I thought this staff realized, okay, we don't got Sam, we don't got Drake. We've really got to be on it in these different areas of the game to be the best football team that we can be. And that hasn't been the case. And so, we'll see what it looks like this week when you go up against Pittsburgh. We know Pat Narduzzi's bunch is going to be well coached. They're going to be physical. We're going to see if Carolina's offensive line can respond, because if not, you're getting to the part in the schedule where teams will find ways to take away Omarion, like in ways that Charlotte couldn't, James Madison, and whoever, and that really puts all the pressure on Jacoby Criswell. And as we learned on Saturday, you ask him to make 2 to 3 throws a game, I think he can make 2 to 3 throws to help you win. He has to make 6 to 8 to 10 throws. I think you're asking too much of a guy that got back on campus back in the summer. So I think the level, how that unit plays moving forward, I think will ultimately dictate what this offense does week in, week out. And as we've learned the hard way once again, if you're not putting up 28 plus points or more, it's going to be hard for this team to win the rest of the way.
Now, with the pressure that he's been under the last 2 weeks, I mean, what do you think about trying to limit some of that pressure? I mean, is there anything that the coaching staff can really do, trying to get the ball out of his hand quicker? I mean, when you're in those third and long situations, even second and long situations, you're looking for plays down the field. So, I mean, it's going to be tough to really find a way to clean that up unless you can really win on first down. That's the only way I could see this getting any better.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can always throw quick, bubble screens, whatever, get the ball to Kobe Pace or Nate McCollum, whoever, let them make plays after the catch. I also don't think it would hurt to get Jacoby Criswell's legs involved in the running game, so then you have to account for him. Right now, there aren't many designed runs. There aren't many times where he's pulling it down and making them account for his legs, which means they can send 6 or 7 because he's simply not a threat to make a play with his legs. You've had that the last couple years with Sam Howell and Drake May that knew how to extend plays and turn something into nothing or escape a sack, or even if a team dropped guys back into coverage, they were athletic and gifted enough to outrun them to a spot and pick up yardage for a first down. Criswell's a physical runner. He's a guy that can put his head down and run over a guy to pick up an extra 2 to 3 yards to keep a drive moving. So that's something I would do. Yes, you can always throw quick screens, just get the ball out of your hands quicker. But if you start calling, I don't know, 4 to 6 designed runs for him per game, and then you start asking him to, if there's nothing there, to pull it down and run it and make these teams account for his legs, they won't be able to blitz the way they've been able to blitz you the last couple of weeks. If Carolina can't find a way to combat the blitzing, this offense is going to struggle, because I don't think Criswell is a guy that can stand in there week after week and make throws against the type of pressure he saw the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, especially if he's going to keep throwing off his back foot. I think the biggest thing for him, and that's something that can improve as the season goes along. But yeah, it's pretty hard not to throw off your back foot when you've got 2 or 3 guys that are coming at you unblocked. So you've got no choice, and he's just relying on his arm strength. I mean, he wasn't going to be a perfect prospect. First of all, this is his first time as a full-time starter. And he was a guy that, if there were things that Carolina's coaching staff wanted to work on with him, they weren't able to do that this offseason because he didn't transfer there until the summer. So when he was coming in, it was more about, can we get you up to speed on the playbook? Can we make sure that you're ready to go in our system where if we need you to play, you're capable of doing so? It wasn't about molding him and figuring out some of the areas that he needed to improve. That would be more next offseason if he ends up being your guy. So, look, there's improvements that can happen throughout the season. But I think ultimately it comes down to either you run the ball successfully for the majority of the season, or you're not going to be able to win games. If teams can shut you down in the second half, it doesn't even have to be the first half, because clearly if they can do it in the second half, I mean, if Duke could do it to you, there's more lethal offenses that you're going to face down the stretch of the season that you could race out to a 3-4 possession lead, and teams are going to be able to storm back on you if they follow the same recipe that we saw in this game. So it's just about getting tougher up front, man. That's really where it starts, is your offensive line has to be better. Your tight ends have to be better blocking, and they have to create those running lanes. And you're right. One of the things that you can do, and they didn't do it as often with Drake, you would see it from time to time, but a lot of Drake's rushing yards came on dropbacks where there simply wasn't anything down the field. With Sam, you saw it, especially in his final season in Chapel Hill. They would actually draw things up to get to use his legs on the ground. And I think you have to start doing that. At least make Jacoby a threat, because we saw there's a reason why he was compared to Sam when he came out of high school. He has that same body style, and he should be allowed to use his legs, because that's going to make this offense the most effective. Now, Greg Ward says something that I think is interesting, and he says Sam had more weapons on offense around him than Drake, but Criswell has less weapons than Drake. I still think he can improve if the O-line improves. Well, first of all, when it comes to the weapons, I mean, I don't know. Does he really have less than Drake has? I mean, you've got two really good tight ends. You've got John Copenhaver, who's actually healthy this year. You've got J.J. Jones. It seems like there's a pretty good amount of depth that they're willing to roll through out there. And you could argue that that's because there are certain guys that haven't really stepped up and made plays. But I don't feel like Jacoby is really at a disadvantage in terms of weapons. I think you really look at that offensive line and have to have the discussion of, is that unit better than the offensive line that Carolina had last year, which, hell, at the end of last year wasn't really that good.
What Jacoby doesn't have that Drake and Sam have, they don't have that dynamic receiver that, if you put the ball in his hands, something's going to happen. Like Sam had De'Ami Brown, NFL wide receiver. We see what he's doing in Washington. He had Daz Newsome, an electrifying player. Then they both had Josh Downs, NFL wide receiver. We saw what he did. We see what he's doing with the Colts. J.J. Jones is a nice receiver. He's not an NFL wide receiver. He's not a game-breaking wide receiver like the guys that Drake and Sam had. That's the only difference. But I thought going into the year that Carolina had enough complementary pieces to overcome it. I thought that this offense wasn't going to be as explosive as it's been in years past, but this offense isn't designed to be what it's been the last couple of years. This is an offense that is built to grind out drives.
Yep.
And do so in a manner with being able to run the football and then use your tight ends, get play action passes to push the football down the field. This isn't what Phil Longo's offense was, where that was a big play offense. That offense lived and died by hitting the home run plays. When you had Drake May last year on this offense, it was a little bit of both. It could be a grinded out offense, but because you had a number 3 overall pick at quarterback, you could make some explosive plays a lot more consistently. And so, I for this team to reach its potential, they were going to have to do more with less and get the most out of every ounce of talent that existed in every unit. And that's what they haven't done. No, he doesn't have the same type of weapons, but he still has guys that can make a difference in the passing game if his offensive line gives him time to find those guys down the field. So, we'll have to see. He showed against James Madison. And I know that game was wacko, but I mean, you don't throw for 400 something yards if you're not capable.
Yep.
Is he going to make some dumb throws? Yes. That's part of playing a inexperienced quarterback who's been around the sport for a while but hasn't started. So he's learning how to get ready week in, week out. But if you protect him, they've got enough guys in the wide receiver room and the tight end room to make the plays you got to make in the passing game to give yourself a chance to win.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you look at J.J. Jones. I mean, could J.J. Jones eventually be an NFL receiver? Yeah, maybe if he could cut out the drops. That's the biggest issue for him. I'll tell you the guy that I think the injuries have really hurt Kobe Paysour. If he didn't break both feet last year, I really wonder what he looks like this year. I wonder if he's that next dynamic receiver, because I thought before that he looked like he was heading in that direction. And because of those injuries, he just does not look like the same player. It looks like he's lost a step. The other one that really hurts, because he was the guy that was dynamic in camp, was Nate McCullum. Nate McCullum hasn't done anything since he has been at Carolina outside of that game against Minnesota. That's the only time that he has done anything in a Tar Heel uniform. He is a guy that needs to wake up, because this team needs a short passing threat out of the slot. Yeah, the tight ends, they've used them in those circumstances, but you can only run those quick outs in the flat so many times with John Copenhaver before teams start to sniff it out and say, you're going to have to do something else in the quick passing game if you want to succeed. That's where Nate McCollum needs to step up. Either that, or even though he's lost a step, just play Kobe Pace, or don't play him. Play Javarius Green. Don't play Nate McCollum because he's useless to you right now. He's not doing anything. You're giving him handoffs that are being dropped for losses. Like, I'm sorry, you don't keep getting this many opportunities. And yeah, with J.J. Jones, man, we need you to be consistent. We can't have you shining one week and then the next week you're dropping 2 or 3 passes. You've got to make those types of plays this year, because in the past, you had quarterbacks that could make up for that. Whether it was with their arm, whether it was with their legs, man, you don't have a quarterback right now in Jacoby Criswell that is that consistent yet. Could it happen at some point? Yes, it could. But you need to help your guys out. Complementary football is important, more important this year than in years past. And you're just not seeing it from a unit that we really thought was going to provide that this year, because we have talked so much. The talent is there. We know Lonnie Galloway can coach these guys. You don't put a receiver in the NFL 5 straight seasons if you can't freaking coach. It's just, for some reason right now, it is not clicking the way that they need it to click. Well, now let's move on to the point that everybody really came here for. And that's talking about, 1, where is this season at? And 2, where is this program at? In terms of where this season is at, I got to be honest, I find it incredibly difficult to see this team rebounding from this. We said last week when we were previewing the game against Duke, this one is crucial. You need to respond to what we saw a week ago against James Madison. And this team did in the first half. They looked motivated. They came out. They had themselves positioned in a great spot. But for you to give away that lead, for you to lose the victory bell, and lose for the first time to Duke in Mack Brown 2.0, and the first time Mack Brown's lost to them since the late 80s, I think it's so hard for me to see this team being able to rally. Maybe I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that this is a team that can dig deep and find something at home against Pittsburgh, a team that for the most part they have done a really great job against. They've actually never lost to Pittsburgh at home since they moved to the ACC, which is unbelievable. But I got to be honest. You look at where Pittsburgh is at, coming off a bye week. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for you. Same situation that you saw with James Madison, and you saw how poorly that went. This is going to be an extremely tough loss to rebound from for this team. And right now, with where the culture is at in this program, I don't know if this team is capable of doing it.
Yeah, I think we're back where we were at the end of the spring, where if they made a bowl game, we'd be pleased, I guess is the right word. And look, to do that, you just got to win 3 more games. So can you get Virginia? Can you get Wake Forest? Can you maybe get Pitt or Georgia Tech at home? I don't know, but I think that's where we're at, and I think, if we take a step back and look at it, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because you're going back to a bowl game. You played 3 quarterbacks in the first 2.5 games of the year. You lose your best defensive player after the first game of the year. But when you're at 3-0 and you had everything in front of you again, if you're just going 6-6, 7-5, it's not going to be as disappointing as it's been the last couple years, but it'll feel like another year where you didn't feel like you accomplished what you could have accomplished as a program. So, I think this week will be telling. Pitt's coming in, good football team. Eli Holstein's been really, really good quarterback. Can you beat them in a shootout? And maybe kind of get some momentum going back up again? We'll have to wait and see. But I think right now, if Carolina finds themselves playing in a bowl game in December, I think you would have to be satisfied, all things considered, with what happened with the loss to James Madison and blowing a 20-point lead to Duke.
I got to tell you, at this point, a bowl game is a miracle. I don't see many wins for this team moving forward. That was one of the easier games that you had, and you couldn't win. You were up 20-0 and you lost. So, I mean, now who are you expecting them to beat? Pitt, the only reason you think they have a chance against Pitt is because they've owned that program. They're not beating Georgia Tech. I don't care, especially now that that's a 12 o'clock game. That's not happening. There's going to be no environment for that game. They're not beating them because a mobile quarterback is going to shred this defense, as we saw a week ago with James Madison. From there, you go on the road to Virginia. Not an easy game. They're honestly better than I think we thought they were going to be coming into this year. I mean, Florida State's a train wreck, but Mack Brown's never beaten them, and we just suck in that building to begin with. Wake Forest, you should beat them because they lost to Louisiana. And then you've got Boston College and State. I mean, how many wins really are there left for this team? This is not – we thought coming into the season this was an easier schedule. When you lost the game to James Madison, that completely changed everything. And that's why this past weekend was so important for you. And you had it in your grasp, and you lost it. Now the margin for error is extremely thin because you're right. I think you have to get this weekend's game, you have to get Virginia, and you have to get Wake Forest. Either that, or you're going to be going into the final game of the regular season against NC State, most likely with your season on the line, your postseason on the line. So, I mean, look, who knows where State's going to be at that point? They certainly haven't been great. But you couldn't beat them with your best teams. So you think you're going to roll into that game, even though it's in your home stadium, and beat them with one of, if not arguably the worst team that Mack Brown has had in Chapel Hill? To me, this one is a loss that kind of cuts the legs out from under this team. And I hope I'm wrong, man, but it's hard to feel positive about the direction of this team this year. And when it comes to the direction of the program, man, this game should have shown you everything that you need to see. This needs to be Mack Brown's final year. I know there are people that are arguing and pushing back, saying that it's not going to be his last year. He's going to decide when he wants to walk away. He basically said it in his press conference today. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, Mack, you quit on this team last week. You literally did in the locker room. You told them that I'm done and then took an hour to decide. It should be at some point this year, you should come up onto that stand on a Monday and you should announce that this will be my final year. And it needs to be sooner rather than later. We'll give you the proper send-off. Make this the final season and use that as motivation for these guys to finish this season strong. Because at this point, that's the only way I see this season turning around. And it's the only way that this program should be thinking about going right now because they need new leadership. These back-to-back losses have shown you that it is time.
Yeah, I think the writing's on the wall. I think what happened against James Madison was the beginning, and I think the second half collapse against Duke was the end. And I think you're going to watch a head coach struggle to come with terms that he's not going to get to go out the way that he wanted to and didn't accomplish everything he set out to accomplish. I've defended Mack Brown probably as much as anybody that has a platform for a guy that has had the losses that we've had and the collapses that we've had. If we want to be serious about football, and we want to act like we care about it, you force him to retire at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. And he moves into, if he wants to stay involved with the university, by all means. If he wants to stay involved with the football program, by all means. He's earned that right. He's the best coach this program will ever have. But you've got to go find some new blood. You've got to go find some new energy, some new ideas, because it's no longer working. It worked. When Mack Brown came back, he set out and accomplished a lot of great things. He made Carolina football relevant. He upped the recruiting. The facilities are the best that they've ever been. The stadium is generally full every Saturday in Kenan Stadium. Some of the best environments we've ever been a part of. What you run the risk of is if he waits this out, is that the job is back in the same position that it was when he took the job.
Yep.
And let's be frank, he was offered the job because nobody else really wanted it. The job was no longer deemed attractive. And that's not where the flagship university of the state should ever be at, even if we're a basketball school. And so I've kind of struggled with it because I love Mac. He's the one guy that's made me believe that we can achieve things on a national level on the football field. And that hasn't happened the way that we hoped it would. But I think Saturday was the conclusion that this needs to be his final season. It's going to be best for his health. It's going to be best for our program. And I think the fan base is at the point now where we're ready to hear a new voice leading our football program.
It's just more evidence of what he said the previous week. What you said in the locker room was not wrong. You have law. It is you. You are not connecting with these players anymore. We have known that. And if you wanted to go out the way that you should have gone out, it should have been after last year. That was the perfect time for him to step away. But he felt like, I don't want to leave this program in a vulnerable position, have this transition year go into the hands of a new coach, and potentially have things start out poorly, because that's what happened when he first got there. And I think he probably remembered that after his first 2 years, there were people that wanted him gone. And rightfully so. I mean, I'm going to tell you, in modern day, if you won 2 games combined in your first 2 seasons, you ain't lasting, man. You're gone. But I think that was an honorable thing to do. But at some point, you got to realize that it just ain't working. When you get out there on game days, you're seeing the same issues show up over and over again. And after a while, I'm not saying you have to listen to what we are telling you, but when multiple outlets are saying, and we're talking national people too, that don't even follow this program day in and day out, but also the people that do, when everybody is saying the culture is the problem there, that ultimately lands on you. This is a different era, but at the same time, you need a hard-nosed coach. And we have not had that version of Mack Brown. We thought maybe this offseason, with some of the talk about how he was handling discipline, some of that kind of stuff, that maybe that old coach would come out again. But it's just not there, man. He's just too old at this point. And at some point, you have to be able to admit that. Put this program in the hands of a younger coach that can transition this thing and make this, potentially a program that could be, back to where Mack Brown ultimately wanted this team to get to. That could compete eventually to make it into the college football playoff. Because I know I saw people that have said it, whenever we've talked about this. Well, what about the recruiting? Guys, what does it matter if you're getting recruits here if they're ultimately not winning anything? I would rather have a guy that develops no-name players and makes this team competitive than have somebody that brings in all the big-name recruits and they don't turn out to amount to anything and ultimately end up either flaming out here or entering the transfer portal and going somewhere else and having success. I'm not saying that's every guy on the team, but those are these crucial guys that you need to be able to succeed at your university to take you to the next level, simply are not doing it. And this thing is trending in the wrong direction. You, as you said, you do not want this thing to get back to where Larry Fedora had it. And if that was the nail in the coffin and the players can sense that, you will be heading there this season. If you finish 3-9, even if it's 4-8, I think there's a lot of concern about where this job is going to be at. So the sooner that Mack Brown says, this is my final season, maybe that sparks this team and lights a fire under their ass that they have not had since that the first few drives of that game against James Madison. That's your hope, I think, of saving this season and ultimately saving this job when it comes to hopefully next offseason. Couple of notes that we have to get to here before we get out of here. We'll start with 3 injury notes from the Mack Brown presser today. Prior to the presser, UNC spokesperson confirms that Kamen Rucker and Darwin are working their way back. That's how they phrase it. So they are hoping to get them back in practice this week and eventually out there for the game on Saturday against Pittsburgh. The big one there, guys, I mean, look, I know that Chip Lindsey talked about how they want to start taking some of the load off of Amarian Hampton, considering that he had 35 touches in the season opener against Minnesota, 35 the other day against Duke, as well as, way more touches against NC Central than they probably wanted. So Darwin Barlow could help do that. Kamen Rucker is the big storyline here. If Carolina can get him back as an edge rusher, I don't know how much it's really going to help them against the run. Rucker was not the best run defender a year ago, but you certainly imagine that he will be better than what Carolina has been rolling with out there, mainly due to just inexperience of some of the other guys. Having a guy like Rucker that's a leader of this defense, maybe that's another spark for this group that allows them to succeed. Christian Hamilton, the starting wide receiver, is still going to be out for this week. That was the original timetable when he got hurt. They said it would be about 2 weeks. So we'll see heading into next week whether or not he is a guy that's being worked back in, or if this is going to take a longer period of time. And then an injury that popped up that we heard about during the game on Saturday, but now has been confirmed by Mack Brown during his press conference today. Kickoff specialist and backup place kicker Liam Boyd is done for the season. Not sure where this injury occurred, but Mack Brown says that this is probably the season for him. And you hate to hear that. A guy that had really found his role with Carolina, came in clutch for Carolina in place of Noah Burnett in the game against NC Central. And now it's, going to be on the leg of the true freshman Lucas Osada to handle the kickoff role. And if something was to happen again to Noah Burnett, he has missed a game already this year with injury, it would be on the true freshman to step up and handle those place kicking reps. So certainly, not an injury to a guy that a lot of people are probably focused on, but one that may be bigger than you realize. We'll have articles up about all of those injury situations on the website for you here later tonight and then eventually into tomorrow. And one last thing that we wanted to say, and we've been talking about it throughout the day on Sports Radio 92.7 WFNZ, and we're going to continue to talk about it for a while because what's going on right now in Western North Carolina is, just horrific. Seeing the scenes that are coming out of places like Asheville, Hendersonville, Chimney Rock, some of the other smaller towns up there, Black Mountain, places like that. It's just so heartbreaking. And, there are countless people right now that could use our help. Josh put up something earlier today. His family is looking for help. They actually went out and got a generator today. So they are a house that is helping a lot of people in their local neighborhood. And they are looking for certain goods and stuff like that. So head over to his Twitter page, right where you're watching this live stream, if you're on Twitter, and for those that aren't on Twitter, at @HTB_Josh, to find out how you can help his family in Hendersonville. And then there are plenty of other resources. I'm actually going to quote tweet a tweet that I saw last night. I'm going to pin it to my profile for you guys to be able to look up. There's a website that has compiled all of the different things that you can donate to and ways that you can help those in Western North Carolina And, we here at the Heel Tough Blog Podcast want to continue to extend our thoughts and prayers to those in Western North Carolina and as well as in Eastern Tennessee for everything that they're going through right now. For those that are still trying to get in contact with loved ones, we're praying that eventually you will be able to get in contact with them, because this is truly one of those moments where, as a state, we want to rally around them. And all of us, I know, wish that we could go up there right now and help in any way possible. But right now we're leaning on those that are able to get in there via helicopter, the first responders, all those, to get in there and help these people out. So any way that we can donate, we are planning to do so. We hope you will as well. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Again, guys, make sure you head over to the website, heeltoughblog.com. We're going to have you covered, with everything. You can go back, read the Duke recap of my 5 takeaways from the game, where I go a little bit more in depth on what we saw. And then we're going to have you ready to go for the game on Saturday against Pittsburgh. We'll have the previews. We're going to be here all year. If it gets worse, hey man, we've been through it. The first year that we did the podcast was 2018. So we've been through it before. We'll go through it again if Carolina is going to have one of those tough seasons, but we're going to be walking you through it. And by that Pittsburgh game, we'll be telling you these are the things that Carolina has to do to come away with a win and turn this season back in the right direction. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for all of that, both on the web, on the blog and podcast side of things. Also, basketball season is right around the corner. Carolina getting ready to, host a couple of scrimmages, the blue-white scrimmage. As of right now, they have not said that they are moving that from Asheville. You would imagine, though, with everything that's going on, that could be in the works here sometime soon. So we're going to keep you up to date on everything surrounding the blue-white scrimmage and what Carolina is going to do with that. Of course, they will have the scrimmage against Memphis on October 15th. That will be televised, so we'll have all the coverage you need for that event as well. And then the start of the season will be rolling around. Carolina will have an exhibition against Johnson C. Smith, and then it will be time to open the season. This is going to be a big one for Carolina basketball. A lot of great matchups early in the season. In the non-conference, we walked you through the conference schedule on the Four Corners podcast here in the last couple of days. 3 editions of the Four Corners podcast that have dropped in the last 3 days. So make sure you go check those out. Again, you can do it on the website, or you can do it wherever you listen to your podcast, same place that you'll find the Heel Tough Blog podcast. And when you go there, make sure that you subscribe to both podcasts. So that wraps it up once again for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.